One temptation sparked this. Now I can feel the darkness. It's my own fault, but you had this planned. All of me you take now, like criminals and shakedowns. Yeah, you make me forget who I am.
1, 2, 3.
Your heart's a vine that I've led trying to climb. Yeah, you're making a ruin of me. Try to survive, keep my spirit alive. But like a knife in the woods, yeah, you hunt down the good in me.
Black Butler Season 2 is laughing at you. It's laughing, and it's laughing hard. It's laughing so hard that it's practically out of breath. That's how hard it's laughing at you. If you've seen more than 3 episodes of it consecutively, then you probably understand the feeling I'm talking about. So, we're going to discuss why that is. Just so we're all on the same page, I'm going to start with a summary of Season 2. I'll go episode by episode. There's a lot of triggering content in this series, specifically this season, actually especially in this season. So if any of the topics over here are upsetting to you, then just tread carefully, and there will usually be some warning beforehand. Especially if you've already seen the season, you can probably infer when, the triggering content will come up. I'll also be providing some timestamps for if you want to watch the season yourself and you don't want to see all the really upsetting stuff. With that being said, if you don't want to see upsetting stuff, the first 2 minutes of the series are not great. In the first episode, we open on this scene bathed in red and covered in cobwebs. There we see this blonde boy. We've never seen him before. This will be Alois Trency, but we don't know his name yet. There's an old man in the bed beside him, and he rises from it, naked, exposed. He goes up to the windowsill and appears to talk to some unseen force, a spider, a demon. It's a very quiet moment. All except for Alois, who yells over and over again, "I want this, I choose this, I choose you." And as he does so, through his open mouth as he cries out, we see a spider and then his contract tattooed right on the back of his tongue. And we are hit by this absolute banger of an intro. And one thing about it is we don't see any of Sebastian or any of CL. As far as we're concerned, those two are dead. They're gone. Their story ended in Season 1, and this is about Alois and Claude. And already the hype for that is growing, obviously. I mean, their intro definitely paralleled CL and Sebastian, but they're very different people. When CL was indifferent and aloof, Alois was desperate and warm. And Claude seems to be a completely different type of demon than Sebastian. I mean, what similarity does a bird have with a spider? It sets the tone of being a lot more dark than the first season ever dared to be. And as the audience has matured somewhat from Season 1, they might be hungry for that. They might want that. They might want to see what this new pair has to offer. The rest of the episode plays out like this. Alois wakes up in a lavender bedroom and is prepared for the day by Claude. Alois is a bit different than CL. He's actively trying to get in Claude's way. He asks Claude if he's bothering him, almost seeming to delight in the idea. After Claude leaves and Alois watches him go with an indifferent expression, he makes eye contact with the camera. He smiles, and then he starts to laugh. He laughs so hard that he flops onto the bed and rolls over. It's almost as if the two of you and Alois Trency, are in on some secret joke that Claude doesn't know about. And like CL, Alois doesn't have only one servant. He also has Hannah, a blue maid who seems obedient and demure in nature. And then he also has the triplets. Over breakfast, Alois startles Hannah, making her look at him, something she's not supposed to do apparently, and then he gouges her eye out with his own finger. And this is because he says he must punish her before Claude does. It's unknown if Claude will actually punish her, but Hannah is hauled away by the triplets, and as Claude cleans his hand, Alois gives the camera a dead, almost knowing look, as if he's asking us a question. We cut back to the two in the study, where Alois isn't doing any work. He doesn't run a company like CL. He really doesn't look too good. He's just zoned out. Face down on the table, Claude arrives and mentions that Alois's uncle Arnold Trancy will be paying them a visit. He states that they have some questions about Alois's time with the fairies. Alois sits up and begins to panic. He's suddenly upset about how he changed the home decor, but Claude quickly assures him that he'll take care of it. He even sinks into a bow, saying, "Yes, Your Highness." Cue a little montage of Claude doing Sebastian type shit, like flinging dishware and dressing a tablecloth, and then the room is clean and the walls are painted. Suddenly, average anime butler. When he's quite done, Alois praises Claude in a way CL never would, and then Claude gives no response, something Sebastian, who can never keep his goddamn mouth shut, wouldn't either. Alois dances around a little bit, but there's no music to accompany him, just the stomping of his boots and the swishing of his coat. It's awkward. It's really awkward. Alois then frowns, facing the audience again, cueing us into the next scene with the grim words of a child who really doesn't want to engage with his least favorite uncle. The morons arrive. The morons do arrive. There's Arnold Trancy, Alois's uncle, as well as a priest, and of course the Viscount of Druid. Of course. Arnold provides some context, saying that Alois was stolen away by the fairies when he was a young baby, and his mother ended shortly thereafter. His father looked for him, and eventually Alois returned, in tow with Claude. But immediately, suspiciously afterwards, the former Earl Trancy perished and left all of his property to Alois, who promptly redid the wallpaper. This is very, very relevant, I promise. So Alois greets everyone. Druid says something awful because of course he's legally obligated to. Alois is all smiles and it looks like the light in his eyes has left. Druid goes off about how nice the redecorating is, so it's a good thing that Claude put everything Alois took down back up. Alois seems to be having a hard time with this, but even as he sheds a few tears, he dismisses it as just him missing his father so much. Over dinner, in a lavishly scarlet dining room, Alois recounts his time locked in some horrible village. He's worked to the bone and kept indoors. It's a tough time, but rather unexpectedly, he mentions there being this other boy that was with him who died. Claude gives him a small side-eye. The guests are stooped and incapable of finding fault in his story, so they leave, but not before Alois takes a case of deeds to horses and land and chucks it out of the upper window, letting it all rain down on Arnold, who only wanted him for his money. Arnold has to writhe around on the ground to pick it up. This is a testament to how rich the Trancys are, but it also shows how little Alois cares about money. He doesn't care. In fact, the only reason he seems to have done this was to get a reaction out of someone, and that someone being Claude. Claude doesn't laugh. Alois stops laughing as soon as he realizes Claude isn't. The two stand in tense silence. Alois eventually breaks that silence, stating bitterly that they have a storm coming. This is not a bad way to start a series. In fact, I'll even say it's pretty good. It sets up Claude and Alois, it sets up their dynamic, it establishes that Claude's a demon, it adds some questionability to Alois's legitimacy, though we don't completely know what the deal is. We're still reeling after that very intense first scene, and we're wondering how that factored into everything. We don't know what the deal is with Hannah. We don't know she's a demon, so the fact that he gouged her eye out is, like, horrifying. But also, he's just a sad little guy. What's going on? Why is he so sad? What's happened to him? So this is just a very intriguing part. We're also wondering what on earth is his dynamic with Claude, because he seems like nothing at all like Sebastian and CL's. And that is just so interesting. I can't wait to learn more about these two and see their relationship develop in full over the course of the anime. This is where the season starts to laugh. It laughs harshly and abruptly, pointing down at you as you shuffle around on the floor trying to pick up crumpled, soiled papers that are your hopes and dreams. It laughs until it realizes that you aren't laughing with it. And then it stops. It turns to you. It says, "You laugh too."
I'm crying now.
they flow out of me when I think about you, 'cause you're the only person in the world that understands. The truth comes out. I've been working on a unified theory. If I make it through tonight, everybody's gotta hear me out, 'cause I'm the right one. On my touch tone telephone, I'm the only one. On your AM radio.
Oh, you thought we were going to be getting a story about a different boy and a demon? Hate to break it to you. They're back. While I spent the past few minutes lovingly reconstructing the first episode, I'm not gonna do that for all 12. I'm sorry, but as soon as Sebastian steps foot on the Trancy Manor, all of it goes, pun intended, straight to I'll still give you a recap though, but it'll be in a funky little style, so if you're listening to this, please avert your eyes to the screen because this took a minute. And so we have Season 2, Episode 1, second half. Through the storm appears a man that is definitely not Sebastian, carrying a suitcase that definitely does not contain CL. He asks Claude and Eloise for lodgings for the night because the storm's pretty awful, and Claude seems a little tense, but Eloise wants him to stay. So they have dinner, and not Sebastian insults Claude about that, and then not Sebastian goes off in his room, and Hannah shows up, and he asks her why she's wearing a bandage, and this could be potential foreshadowing that she's a demon, because he asks her, why do you wear a bandage, not what happened to your eye? Whatever it is, it's really short-lived. Eloise shows up, scares her off, and then tries to see what's in Sebastian's luggage. Sebastian is like, I'll show you, but only if you show me the basement. And Eloise is like, okay, sounds good. And now, okay. Eloise probably already knew that that box contained CL. In fact, this whole episode reads best if you interpret it as Eloise and Claude trying to trick Sebastian so they can catch him and take his luggage. That's why Eloise came in alone, but Claude's been following them. That's because at this very moment, these are our protagonists, not them, these people. Anyway, if this was CL and Sebastian, CL taking a suspicious person down to see some suspicious artifacts in the basement wouldn't be that big of a deal because he'd know that Sebastian would catch them anyway and would protect him in case something bad were to happen to him. And, that's because he's a demon butler and Sebastian can do everything. And now this logic applies to Eloise and Claude. So, when Sebastian steals the little box containing a certain something, Claude shows up to absolutely wreck his shit. This man gets revealed as Sebastian, the box cracks open, Eloise is like, oh my god, CL, I finally found you, which, that is a strange thing to say about someone you just met, unless these two already know each other. Anyway, we get some butler on butler violence, Claude chases Sebastian drops a chandelier on him, and then in the confusion, he escapes through a window with CL and the box he stole from the Trancies. So, apparently that CL and Sebastian are always safe as long as they have each other logic does not apply to Claude and Eloise, because they got scrambled pretty badly. Anyway, the mansion is pitch black now, and that leaves Eloise to cry out. He orders Hannah and the triplets to go after them, but he doesn't want Claude to leave him alone in the dark. There's a parallel to that boy from his flashback earlier to solidify how close Eloise has grown to this demon. And this is reinforced by Claude's affirmation that he won't ever leave him. Day and night, sugar and salt, creature and corpse, defiled and immaculate. He appears to be trying to comfort Eloise with that phrase, and he continues to fumble around trying to do so, or at least we think he's trying. He says he'll make one hell of a feast out of Eloise, which just makes Eloise even more upset. Which, I think telling a kid, no matter how terrible the kid's self-esteem is, that you wish to eat him is not a very comforting thing to say. Anyway, Alois pushes Claude away and vows that they should all be swallowed up by the darkness. He wouldn't care either way. Perhaps he's upset that his season got taken from him. Anyway, we cut back to Sebastian, who has unpacked his luggage in the woods and is putting that fucking blue ring back on Ciel, who is not moving and looks dead, especially considering the first season ended with him being dead. So what's going on? What happened? Please tell us what's going on. Episode 2, Ciel and Sebastian go on a boat trip. Episode 3, Ciel and Sebastian go on a London trip. Episode 4, Ciel and Sebastian go on a train trip. Do you understand what I mean when I say it feels like the show is laughing at you? I'm not gonna say that these episodes were completely worthless filler. I mean, the second one, the boat one, is so simplistic. It's the kind of episode you could probably put on for your 8-year-old cousin who wanted to watch anime. You don't need to know who any of the characters are, and you don't really even need to know any of the context. I think the plotline that it focuses on about these kids trying to find this mythical animal off in the woods has actually happened before in a Land Before Time movie. The third episode has Grell, so that's an immediate bonus. If you want to watch any of these little filler episodes, I would highly recommend the third because it's just the most entertaining. It's about them finding some cases of spontaneous combustion. There's a camera that can set people on fire and can burn them so brightly that their souls will cease to exist, which is wild just to think about. And the person who's been setting the fire is highly implied to have been somehow seduced by Claude in some way, or he's got some deal going with them. So he's getting his fill of souls through London through these proxies in addition to Alois, which is just like, what? It's a whole arsenal of Chekhov's guns, and none of them are touched. Anyway, the fourth episode, they're all on a train. That's kind of it. It ends with Claude giving Sebastian an invitation to the Trancy Manor, which will take up the next 2 episodes. But other than that, they're literally just on a train. If you didn't watch season 1, this would be a pretty good introduction. And if you see it through that lens, then the boat episode makes total sense. And also the Grell episode is essential because she will come back. She will come back. I'm not so sure about the train episode. However, we did get this.
今そっちへ俺のケツだ何
I shouldn't be smiling. I just don't know what kind of person would watch Black Butler Season 2 without first watching Black Butler Season 1. If you don't enjoy Pluto, you're a fake fan, and I hate you. Episode 5 is the day of a costume ball, so everyone Ciel knows is going to be there, and that includes Soma, Agni, and Finny, Bardroy, and Mayron. Ciel and Sebastian meet Claude at the front of the house. Ciel is immediately like, oh my god, the vibes here are atrocious, and Sebastian doesn't pay any attention to that. Anyway, I didn't mention it earlier, but Ciel has amnesia, but only over season 1. However, season 1 did really badly traumatize him. That's the entire point of season 1, traumatizing a bunch of 12-year-olds in and outside of the TV screen. But he had a bit of a character arc as a response to that trauma in season 1, and we can't have any sense of development now, can we? As far as Ciel's concerned, this season is season 1, and all his friends who have read the manga are really distraught about it because he keeps bringing up his favorite character, Madame Red, and they've all been spoiled to know she's dead. Anyway, their costumes are enough to make a sensitivity reader want to cry. We cut back to Alois trying to pick a costume for the party, and then he eventually decides he's just going to steal Hannah's dress. We get some very weird and unnecessary fan service. I promise I'll discuss that in a bit. And anyway, the party starts. Ciel's dressed as a pirate, because of course he is. Anyway, this little blue maid shows up, spills some wine on Ciel, and then leads him away from the main party because she wants to help clean it up. So they're hiding in a back room, Ciel and this blonde girl. She tries to get the wine out of his coat, but doesn't, actually know how to do it. He's like, what the fuck? You said you'd clean my coat. What are you doing? And then she gets really close to him, remarks on how blue his eyes are, how blue his soul is, and then laments about how she wishes that she was that blue. And then, this is the most charitable description I can give for this scene. She distracts him long enough to snatch his eye patch and books it. That's not a maid. That's Aloise Trency. Ciel runs after him, but he gets some flashbacks to the first episode because apparently he could hear everyone yelling while he was still in that suitcase, and then he runs into the woods. Aloise is there, mocking him, Sebastian shows up, Claude emerges, they have this little standoff, and Aloise finally clarifies his motivation. Why is he doing this? Why is he so relentlessly pursuing Ciel? That's because he wants Ciel, and he'll kill everyone still in the ballroom to accomplish this goal. But as you can probably already tell, there's a pretty big elephant in the room that I think I need to talk about before we get a little deeper into this summary. So I think we're gonna have to put the summary on pause so I can take a little sidebar and discuss this thing. Alright?
Hard to obey. I kissed a boy and I liked it.
Hello. I'm gay CL Phantom Hive. The thing I want to talk about is the fact that I think there's a weird amount of queerbaiting in season 2, and I don't think anyone discusses it. This isn't a video essay talking about the nuances of that term. In fact, I think I'd be lying a little bit if I said it was actual, legitimate queerbaiting. I'm going completely off script right now because I can't see well enough to see a script, so I'm just speaking from the heart. Black Butler has this awful tendency where it will not queerbait the audience, but it will yaoi bait the audience. Queerbaiting, it gives the impression that a queer story is going to be told, that something that will appeal to a queer audience is being dangled in front of them like a piece of salami in front of a little dog. And then it gets brutally ripped away because the producers don't want to go that far and lose that amount of money because people are homophobic and whatnot. That's a vague summary of queerbaiting. Yaoi baiting is more like they make a joke or a few jokes or 10 jokes where it looks like something is going to turn into a yaoi. You know, think of like the corset scene. The manga panels specifically framed to make it look like something sexual is happening, and then in the next page it's revealed that nothing sexual is happening. But oh, got you there. You thought something bad was gonna happen. But this is particularly bad in Black Butler because, well, for one thing, because it's usually between the 13-year-old Ciel and the 1,000,000,000-year-old immortal demon Sebastian. It's really uncomfortable. It's not fun. I don't like it. That's why I was tearing up. The eye patch. How does he do it? How is... No wonder he's so angry all the time. I'm miserable. The point I was reaching was a lot of people find this very uncomfortable. This is kind of a known thing of the Black Butler fandom. We all kind of know what's going on, and we cringe and we look away. That is one of the biggest appeals of the Tumblr fandom, is the fact that there's a very close-knit community that does not have any interest in Claude Louise or Ciel, and is more focused on the other elements. So we've acknowledged that the series was important to us growing up, and that we just have a very strong connection to it, that we would devote so much time and energy to it. It's just difficult when something is uncomfortable, and as we saw in the much earlier fandom, it's even more difficult when the most popular ship is to a lot of people very, very, very uncomfortable. I think this wig is gonna make me cry. It's so itchy. What if I told you there was another ship? A ship that was baited a fair amount in the anime in much the same way, but doesn't involve a 3,000,000-year-old demon and a human boy? What if it was a ship between two humans in a very similar situation? What happens when you take a story that's already known for throwing these queer jokes in, but then you give the characters other characters that you could feasibly ship them with? The shippers now have an easy way out. Talking about this should be autism heaven, but right now, I am in sensory hell. I just want to get into part of the reason why Sebastiel was so popular in the early fandom, and that's because there really wasn't anything else. We're all 13, they were the two main characters, they were all in the official art. It's fine, it's normal, we're 13, I wouldn't mind dating a demon butler, it's okay! You could say that Season 2 was made specifically so the writers could save themselves from this rabid Sebastiel fanbase. I mean, it's kind of like the trope when you have two characters that the audience thinks are queer, and then you just throw in a few more characters to be love interests for them to completely remove the ship from the table. They basically pulled a Voltron on them. But they didn't do that. In fact, they used Eloise and Claude as a way of almost propping up Sebastiel. You tried! Ciel and Eloise have a lot of scenes together, and those scenes are widely considered some of the best scenes in the show. I mean, they're challenged only by this one. Never gets old. Anyway, Eloise is a character with such obvious queer coding that it's impossible to read him as anything other than queer. His story is saturated with disturbing tropes, and yet his relationship with Claude is also very difficult to read as anything other than the dependence of someone who can't tell the difference between craving validation and care and wanting a romantic figure to hold them close. So, to recap, this show has no scruples against throwing around yaoi jokes of its younger characters. This is a second season with a cast that copies the first season. One of the copycats is a confused, desperate boy wrapped in an extremely queer subtext, and for most of the story, his dialogue sounds something like, "I will make you mine, CL Phantom Hive. You're mine, CL Phantom Hive. I want you, CL Phantom Hive." Throw in some cross-dressing, I saw that blush, CL, and some ignoring of personal space, and a late-game revelation, one of the most tragic endings of a character I think I've ever watched, and then boom, you get Black Butler Season 2's bizarre case of Ciel Louise. And don't even get me started on Claude Bastion. I don't have to make an essay explaining what the fuck those two had going on, just look at this screenshot. Come on, look at it with your own eyes. Okay, so what does all of this mean? Are they gay? No. No, they're 13. But there's definitely a queer reading on it, and whatever these two are, their stories are undoubtedly incredibly close. Their characters are incredibly close. They understand each other in a way that not very many characters can, if anyone else. And so exploring their dynamic in a more calm and wholesome way where they actually get to talk it out, that would be fantastic. Go watch my reanimation, please. The second part will come out at some point, but watch the first part. It's based off of that premise. I'm pretty sure Yana Taboso also ships it. I mean, look at some official art. Just look, they're just little friends. They're just having a sleepover. They're hanging out, being kids. I love how all of this basically removes the weird objectification of Ciel and Sebastian, because whenever Eloise is in frame, Sebastian is literally just the chaperone mom. Aw, they're at Disneyland, and wait, why does Ciel have the Mickey ears and Eloise has the Minnie ears? Yana, what are you telling us? Episode 6 continues the plot thread of Episode 5, with Sebastian and Claude duking it out in the woods while their respective children gawk at them. Claude keeps giving orders to the triplets like they're Pokemon. This is the first instance where we realize they're demons. Speaking of demons, meanwhile at the party, Hannah emerges looking lovely in a black gown, and she pulls out this very strange instrument. It's called an harmonica, and it's capable of, you guessed it, mind-controlling the party guests into a murderous rampage against everyone Ciel loves. But that's short-lived. Sebastian comes in, fixes everything with some wine glasses. Ciel and Eloise attend the party like they didn't just fight each other in the woods. They very briefly straight bait us into thinking Eloise is going to steal Ciel's girlfriend, and then in this official art for the same episode, they straight bait us again into thinking Femme Eloise is going to steal Lizzie's boyfriend. Why did I write that? Oh, at least they know the definition of a love triangle, so that's one win. Anyway, Sebastian and Claude need a moment alone, so they leave their masters to go fight in the lake like men. They come to the realization, while choking each other, that they may have some similar goals. So, okay, listen very carefully, because this is the entire plot. So, at the end of Season 1, the angel Ash Landers chopped off Sebastian's arm, the same arm that had the contract seal. So at the end of Season 1, when he went to take Ciel's soul, there was an issue. Because he didn't have the physical CL warranty anymore, Claude was able to sneak in and steal the soul, which was attached to the blue ring. But Claude couldn't eat it, because he didn't have a contract of CL. He just had the soul ring. And you can't get a contract from an inanimate object. It needs to have a body and a mind too. So Claude and Aloise planned to take the little ring CL soul thing and lure Sebastian into the Trancy Manor to retrieve it. And knowing him, they figured he'd bring CL's body with him. And then they'd capture and kill Sebastian and then stick the soul back into CL. And then, well, here's where it gets blurry. Claude wants to eat CL. Aloise, you'd assume, would want Claude to eat CL, but actually Aloise wants no one to eat CL. He wants to save CL. Anyway, Sebastian wants to get CL's body back, and he does, so he has CL's soul and CL's body. Yippee! But he doesn't have CL's revenge, so the soul that he's been working so hard to perfect doesn't taste good. And because CL doesn't remember his revenge, there's a huge glaring issue with the contract. See, CL wants Sebastian to help him fulfill the revenge, but he doesn't want Sebastian to just murder the people without him being there to see for himself. Meaning, he's not going to just accept it. And the person who murdered his family back then was Ash Landers, who is dead. So either they find CL's memories of murdering Ash Landers, or Sebastian brings Ash Landers back from the dead to kill that fucking bird again. And that would arguably be better than what we got, but, so what? Anyway, Sebastian is stuck in this terrible paradox, but Claude is like, hey, I know I just ruined everything, but why don't we lie to our masters? Claude wants CL's soul because he thinks CL's soul would taste better, so he basically is like, hey, Aloise wants CL, let's make CL want Aloise. Let's make CL want to kill Aloise. So, they plan to frame Aloise. They do some paperwork, and then they come back to the party like nothing happened. Makes sense? Okay, cool. It took 7 rewatches to figure all that out. I'm not even joking. And a lot of it, I had to assume for logic's sake. But, episode 7. This is the best episode, except the part where the druid shows up, which is unfortunately a large portion of it. Anyway, CL thinks Aloise murdered his parents, so he goes over to his house, they have some snacks, and then they watch their butlers fucking murder each other. Just rich kid things. We get to the... Oh, right, God, I have to explain the sword. So, this is awkward. There's a super magical sword in Hannah's inventory, and as per their dramatic demon duel, Claude has to take it out so he can properly skewer Sebastian with it. Normal? Okay, he sticks his entire hand down her throat to do so. Druva is also there. I think that's as unpleasant as the whole hand-mouth sticking part. It's not even the worst Hannah scene. But anyway, the budget goes up temporarily, and the butlers start fighting, but their masters have gotten antsy. CL and Aloise are tired of watching TV, so they want to go inside and kill each other. They have a little sword fighting match, and CL tries to cheat, but Aloise is like, no, we play fair, and then absolutely demolishes CL in a pretty fair way. He's just not good at this. This is also the first time Aloise even handled a sword, so yeah, CL, what's your excuse? But even as he's lying on the ground, stunned, CL manages to edgelord his way out of this disaster. The butlers cease their homoerotic sword fight to go check on the children. And by check on, I mean Sebastian picks up CL and leaves Aloise screaming, crying, and twitching on the ground in a pool of his own blood. Still reeling from his stab wound, Aloise manages to grab a hold of CL's pant leg and sort of haul himself up, and he pleads with CL, begging CL not to kill him, and he says this one extremely important phrase, "We've both been tricked by demons." And I just want to think about that for a minute, because it is in stark contradiction to everything that we think we understand about Aloise. It completely changes our view of his dynamic with Claude, and it just absolutely recontextualizes why he wants CL. does he want Ciel to like have like a little, I don't know. Does he want Ciel, or does he want to save Ciel? And it's just incredible. Like, oh my god. Oh my god. Anyway, yeah, this was recorded like a day like 2 weeks after the other stuff. Some of Ciel's blood ends up in Claude's mouth, and then the entire
Offer a sacrifice. Come on and show them your love. Rip out the wings of a butterfly for your soul, my love. Rip out the wings of a butterfly for your soul.
Episode 8. I can't be funny about this one. It's just really sad. This one features an opening. I didn't mention earlier, but remember that opening I talked about in the first episode? The one that only has Aloise and Claude and none of Ciel or Sebastian? It gets replaced with a different opening that features more of a collective cast in episode 2, and it really cements how the anime was trying to pull a sneaky and make us think Aloise was the protagonist. This is the one other episode this season where the new opening is replaced with the only Aloise and only Claude one, so it's a direct parallel to episode 1. And it opens with Aloise in his room, recovering from the stab wound. Claude is rewrapping his bandages. They make a haha silly joke about how Ciel could have done a better job of trying to kill Aloise. Haha, this will be incredibly relevant later. And anyway, Aloise asks Claude if he enjoys the smell of his blood, since he remembers Ciel's blood made Claude start acting really odd, and as if savoring the very notion of the blood he had tasted just a few days prior, Claude smiles and leaves. And Aloise looks truly disturbed. Aloise does not want to die. Aloise does not want Claude to smile at him. Aloise, we will later find, only wants Claude to love him in a very pure way. But that love fueled with desire and want, it's disgusting. He's really scared. And so, Aloise staggers out of bed, crashes into Hannah, and starts crying, begging her to take him to Ciel, to the one person who would understand. He wants to be saved. He wants to save Ciel. On the horse ride out, clutching a bleeding side, Aloise remembers his past. It all comes rushing back. That story we heard earlier, that he was the noble's son, kidnapped and forced to work in a village, that's all lies. Aloise, or at last the name he was known by when he was a child, Jim, is just an orphan, stuck with another orphan by the name of Luca. They're little kids, but they're hated as thieves, despised by their entire village. They have to survive somehow. Aloise, as any bitter kid might, cries out, "I want everyone to die!" And Luca, who looks up to him as his big brother, takes those words to heart. And it should be noted, he's also in the habit of calling his brother, "Your Highness." Sound familiar? So Luca makes a contract. He dies, and the entire village burns away. Jim, some indiscernible time later, is picked up along with several other surviving children. They're taken in a wagon to the Trancy estate, where they are presented before the Earl as... The story does a really, really bad job of portraying this, but Jim and the other boys are supposed to be sexually abused by the former Earl Trancy. While their ages are unclear, we know the former Earl died when Jim was 11, so he has to be a bit younger than that, which is horrifying. And we spend some time lingering on it in the dull basement of the Trancy Manor, before Jim drifts off to sleep and dreams of fairies. The fairy, the demon, Claude Faustus, appears to him. He asks Jim what wish he wants to have granted. It's not a formal contract. In fact, the scene is tense and unnatural, Claude's face distorted as a warbling Italian OST fills the room with a sense of dread and unease. Jim doesn't know what he wants, and so Claude tells him that as soon as he has a goal, he may summon him once more. Jim doesn't want to die, so he does his best to get on the good side of their captor. And this is not a scene where he seduces the old man. It's played up as kind of lighthearted, probably so the horror of it doesn't affect the audience too badly, which it's so badly handled. I genuinely don't know what to say for this part. Terrible job, everyone. Anyway, we cut forward to what we'd assume to be a few months after that, to Jim standing in a scarlet office addressing Claude, who is dressed as a soldier. At this point, it would be our assumption that the Earl has given Jim some form of power, maybe even started the lie that he was his own son. Okay, anyway, at this point, he's Alois. Claude informs him that Sebastian was the demon that took his little brother's soul, and Alois, wanting to save that boy from such a cruel fate as what befell his poor little brother, decides to finally cash in that wish. We cut to the former Earl's funeral. He's dead. Thank God. Alois and Claude restate their plans, and it's even dropped that Alois freed the other boys that were being held captive at the estate. It's such a kind thing to do. He just wants to save those in the same situation as him, and that's an oddly consistent character trait. And we linger on it. Before Alois jolts awake in the compartment of the cab, Grell is beside him, and she wants to take his soul. He's fated to die tonight. The two of them argue a bit. Hey, whatever happened to queer adults protecting queer kids? Before Hannah shows up and fucking attacks Grell, Alois makes a run into the forest, clutching his bleeding side, but he's not gonna get far. He collapses, thinking of his past of Claude, how Claude took the phrase that Alois' little brother Luca had, "Yes, your highness." As Grell and Hannah rip chunks out of each other, he reflects on how he wanted Claude to accept him, unlike the villagers, how he wanted Claude to want him, but unlike the way the Earl had wanted him. He wanted pure, kind love, and so pulling himself onto the top of a hill and gasping for breath, he resigns himself to the mistakes that had led to this point. A wolf stalks him. Grell finishes mauling Hannah, and through the woods, Claude emerges. Alois begs Claude never to leave his side. He knows he won't make it to Ciel, and so the other part of him, the part that wants to be loved more than he wants the other boy to live, that's the part of him that wins. It's a final reach, and desperately, he calls Claude his highness.
You can't ever leave my side! Never! Not you! Please, Claude! Do you know? I think you're my highness.
What a thing to say to a butler.
And that was episode 8. God. I think I need to lay down. Episode 9, Ciel and Sebastian go on a London trip. No, that's not necessarily correct. Ciel and Sebastian do go to London to investigate a few cases of eye gougings. They think they're being mocked by the Transies, and, they are, but Alois is dead, so obviously one of the other ones is behind it. Sebastian needs to go fight some Reapers. He puts Ciel in a crate for safekeeping, and Ciel has a moment of, oh my god, this is just like the other time I was in a box on a shelf from 2008 to 2010. So, he's mad, and he jumps out of the box, and he literally gets arrested by the police. Claude waterboards him, and then once he's managed to get Ciel in enough of a confused, disoriented, miserable state, he takes Alois' ring, which contains Alois' soul, and puts it on him. What I like about this season is that it doesn't try to explain anything, it just throws you into the action and tells you to keep up. I've seen it 8 times this year, please God, would it kill them? Have a plot point that has build up and... okay, anyway... Claude is a very reasonable man. He figures he has a contract of Alois Transi. He wants a contract of Ciel Phantomhive. So he'll just fuse them into one thing. So he'll have the ultimate contract. Brilliant! The worst part of it is, it works. It actually works. The series logic might be bullshit, but at least the characters know it's bullshit. Anyway, Ciel is very confused. His memories are intermixed with Alois's, which, as we just heard in episode 8, is not a very fun time. He's upset, he hates this, he's really cold, he tells Sebastian to go fuck off, and so Sebastian is forced to leave due to the contract, because that was an order. Sebastian! This is an order. Don't talk to me. Sebastian throws a hissy fit outside. Episode 10. Grell appears, thank God. We get a very extended sequence of Claude being one of the creepiest characters in Black Butler, and I do genuinely believe that. Claude fans have to specify, I like him, but I don't like this version of him. I like him from episode 1 when he wasn't fucking doing all this weird shit. Sebastian and Grell end up trekking back to Eloise's old village. They get some exposition about the whole Luca contract thing, and then the two murder the triplets. I'm very grateful they included Grell because she is genuinely the best part of these sequences, especially post Eloise's death. It's the queers. We need the queers. Also, we get some delightfully confusing Hannah body horror, and CL has a pretty bad night. Sebastian makes it back to the Trancy Manor and gets into a little kerfuffle with Claude on the front steps, only for both of them to realize, if you're here and you're here, who's watching the baby? The baby, who is now CL's body and Aloise's mind, is standing atop a very tall clock tower that was not here before, and he tells them they gotta come get him before he falls off. During the body horror sequence, Hannah ended up, taking Eloise's eye from his corpse and then putting it in her mouth so she could show it to CL, who was at the moment, like, it was CL's consciousness, Eloise's consciousness was dormant, so after she horrified him, CL kind of tapped out, and Eloise's soul, which was sort of existing under the surface, came to light, and that's why the body's on top of a clock tower now. Episode 11. Hannah tells the two useless men that if they ever want to get Eloise or CL's souls, they're going to need to complete a series of questions through an intricate maze beneath the clock tower. I am not making this up. This series was literally so confusing that its grand finale is a pop quiz. The questions are based around Alois Trancy. Since he died feeling unloved, he's making them all answer questions specifically tailored to him, as if trying to restate that he's the main character. But they're not just questions about Alois. They are questions whose answers appeal to Alois's version of reality. For instance, there's the question, what's Alois's real name? Is it Jim or is it Alois? And the correct answer would be Jim because that was the name he was born with, but the right answer would be Alois. So in other words, Alois says trans rights. There is a scene that starts with a question on the manner of Alois's abuse and ends with Grell getting thrown through a door. So if that's not a testament to the show's egregious tone problem, I don't know what is. Claude figures out how the questions are rigged, so he makes it to Alois first, but then he decides he's got to be an asshole and gets immediately sent to the start with a red buzzer. Alois, who is still puppeting CL's body, starts to cry. Hannah comforts him and assures him she loves him. It's at this moment he realizes Luca didn't make the contract with Claude, but rather with Hannah, and the reason she's been following him for so long is because she wants to keep him safe, or, well, she wanted to eat him, but she wanted to return him to his brother, so it's like her intentions were good. Episode 12 starts sometime around here, but these two always blur together, so I'm just going to keep going. Alois makes a deal with Hannah. Sebastian and Claude go to the secret demon sanctuary islands where they can play their emo music as loud as they want without anyone calling the cops. This is because, as far as these two demons are concerned, they have to fight each other in order to acquire CL's soul. What they don't know is that something's happened to CL's soul while they were busy doing that. So they're dueling blind, the kids are scheming, well, Alois is scheming, CL's he's a little shaken. They fight, Claude dies in a ditch, Sebastian realizes he's been outsmarted by a 14-year-old, CL becomes a demon as per Alois's contract of Hannah. Alois, he gets eaten, but, he's fine. And then the series ends. Was that a ride or what? I was really rushing through that last part, but, that's okay. We'll get back to it later. Wow, that was a surprisingly thorough summary for for the first part of a video essay. That was really thorough. You don't have to watch the season now. Please don't. It's very bad. I've seen it a bunch of times, and I will say the two best viewing experiences I had were 1, when I was really sick, and 2, when I was really socially exhausted. The 4 other best times watching it I've ever had was when I was watching of someone else who preferably hadn't seen it for a while, so we could all be shocked and amazed at the same times. So that was fun. Kind of. It was, it's one of those shows that my, love for it, as you can, I'm mean about it. I'm harsh towards it. This whole thing is me going on a very long and strongly worded rant about it. But still, I mean, a large portion of, when the entire online identity for me, for Nullbird, just in existence is Season 2. What? I look like that one meme, the whole, I hate Season 2. I hate Black Butler Season 2. But anyway, so, final thoughts. It's bad. It's kind of like high school. It was long, and it passed the time, and it wasn't very fun, and now it's over. But I came here to talk about it, so talk about it I will. So, okay, let's just go over a quick rapid-fire list of anything else you might have missed that I didn't get the chance to cover. Alright, cool. First thing on the list, there is an OVA that is infinitely better than the entire season. If you heard about this and thought any of these characters were at all interesting, I would highly recommend that you go watch the Spider OVA, which is it's an original video animation. Obviously, it's an OVA, and it's basically all about Eloise trying to take care of a butterfly and it dying. Sorry, spoilers for the OVA, but it's basically him and all of his servants and the way that each of the servants view him. It's like a collection of character studies. It's extremely good when it comes to character analysis, and it gives you a very nice taste of all the characters without it being too upsetting. None of the aside from one very short clip of him wearing the gown that he wore when he saw the former Earl, it doesn't have any of that triggering stuff. So if you want to see these characters and you want to endear yourself to these characters, you can absolutely watch that one. It's available free on the site GoGo, and it's on Netflix. I don't condone pirating. Second thing, this anime very desperately tries to be artistic, but it really it's a bit of a mixed bag. I'll talk about the animation in a sec, but there is a very interesting color narrative that follows Eloise that I just love to nerd out about. So, okay. The former Earl Trancy's color scheme is mostly red. As we saw in the first episode, Eloise had to redo all the wallpaper so it wasn't red anymore, because red was the color of his abuser. Red was the color of the clothes he wore when he was with that man. So red is a very not great color for Eloise, and as we see in the first Eloise opening, Claude is saturated with red. So it's kind of a way of showing how he's pulling Eloise towards the darkness in the same way Sebastian will lovingly guide Ciel down the stairs in a very abrupt tumble. Meanwhile, Hannah is blue, and blue is a very good color for Eloise. It almost represents Eloise's salvation. Blue as in the bluebells that were part of his nostalgic childhood with Luca. Blue as in, well, for one thing, blue as in Ciel, which is the one thing that Eloise was reaching towards, trying to protect. And now take all of this and also think of Eloise's child design. There he is, he's a scruffy little kid, he's got a green vest. So if red is Claude and abuse and pain, and blue is salvation and peace and happiness, and green is the color that represents Eloise in his most base form, then we turn to Eloise's current design and we see that he's a boy in a green vest wearing a mauve coat. It is purple. It is slightly more red than it is blue, but it is purple. And then in the final episodes, when Eloise finally turns his back on Claude and is embraced by Hannah and chooses love and life and one other thing that we will get into, this is extremely important for this whole color thing, because he is in Ciel's body, and Ciel's extremely blue, so it's like the blue has won over the red, and if anyone were to ask me what my favorite thing about this season is, it's that. Anyway, number 3, the animation is kind of awful. No. There are moments where it gets really good, and then there are moments where it is not very good. 2 moments that are exceptionally nice are, well, for one, there's the sword fight between Aloys and Ciel. That one is beautiful and honestly really nice looking, even though it was, like 2010. Like, that's some Attack on Titan level, stuff. And then there's also, a lot of the Grell scenes are handled with a lot of rendering care, which I appreciate, because that's what she deserves. I recently rewatched Season 1, and I came to the conclusion that even though Season 1 has its own issues, there still feels like there's a lot of love that went into it. Like, just look at the backgrounds. They're in this softer shade of almost watercolor paint, which really sells the Victorian aesthetic. And even the frames where the characters aren't doing anything, there's still enough detail on their faces for them to look, cute. Like, you can take any screenshot and it usually won't look terrible. It might look a little cursed, though. It is Season 1. And you can also see that by the pentagram in Ciel's eye, because, okay, in Season 1, it's drawn on whenever it shows up. In Season 2, it's a PNG. I'm not joking, he literally has a PNG over his eye, and it's so obviously copy-pasted that, every time I rewatch it with someone, I always point it out, and it's super annoying, but it's a PNG. This contract, that's the most important thing in the entire series, like the symbol of Black Butler, the star over his eye, is a PNG. One of the biggest issues is that it has a lot of shots where it shows a scene with all the characters zoomed out, so you can get the entire picture of everyone, which makes sense. It has a pretty large cast. But the main issue is all of these scenes are drawn in such an empty way, and all of the characters that stand and populate them look so jarring. The whole thing is very unappealing and feels very empty. Like, this doesn't feel like a world that they live in. And the tone is one of the worst parts, because it will cycle between some of the most traumatic stuff you've ever seen and then immediately bounce back to silly Black Butler shenanigans. Like, Season 1 had a fairly consistent tone of being a dark comedy with a bit of a gothic twist. Like, you knew it was gonna be dark, but there was an understanding that it would be weird, but it wouldn't be that bad. That was the vibe of Season 1. But Season 2, oh my god. Look at Aberline from Season 1, and then look at Aberline from Season 2. Oh right, I forgot Aberline's back, but it feels almost like it's trying to parody itself, which we'll get into. We'll say, you can say all you want about how Season 2 is, objectively as a piece of media, worse than the manga by a very, very long, wide margin. But I want to say that even if that's true, Season 2 is still laughing at the manga. And that's a very bold claim, since if you've been in the Black Butler fandom for any amount of time, the #1 rule is the manga is superior, the anime could never compare. And I get that. So I'm going to revise that statement. The entire anime is what's laughing at the manga.
You feed the machine, bring them all back down to their knees. No time to waste. Remind the slaves, they ain't gonna make it out alive today. I said, hey, you poison the well. Watch it all burn, take him straight to hell. He's got the whole world in his hands. It was nice to know you. We've all been damned, come on. We've all been damned, come on.
Oh no, I just had a horrible dream that the awful Black Butler anime replaced the manga. I'm being ridiculous, but I know I just need to check to be sure. Oh, thank the Lord. I think we all know where this is headed. So anyway, I made this little timeline to show what arcs in the manga were airing alongside the seasons, since the first anime came out in 2008, and the second anime came out in 2010, and the manga started in 2005. And it's kind of a known thing that the latter half of season 1 was as wacky as it was because it didn't follow the manga, because the manga hadn't come out yet. It was a little bit like Soul Eater. And instead of taking a really long hiatus like Attack on Titan, they just barreled through and went, nope, we can slap together some anime original content, just throw in some random ideas. But here's the thing. I don't think that those ideas were random. In fact, I think that the anime almost serves as a very literal, darker parallel of what's happening in the manga. Stuff that happens in the manga is the same stuff that happens in the anime, but it's twisted somehow. It feels almost like some unhinged second version, as though it heard the plot through a game of telephone and then reconstructed it through some very vague character details. And now, I could ramble on and on about this, but I think we all need a little bit of a visual before I get into it. So, allow me to give you the biggest example that I have for this. Ciel is kidnapped by Claude. While in some kind of torture chamber of a laboratory, he is put under intense mental pressure to the point where his very memories begin to reform. He now loathes Sebastian because he believes the demon devoured his little brother. Claude is there, watching over him. Claude is a terrifying grown man who wields a weapon capable of greatly injuring a demon, and that weapon is in the form of a large blade. Claude also wears spectacles, but whenever he's fighting or doing something particularly unhinged, those spectacles drop. And his plan is to use Ciel to fill in the role that has been taken by another boy, a boy who is in turn another fraud. In other words, he wants Ciel to replace another boy, a boy whose very identity has begun to mix with Ciel's. Do you not believe me? That's alright. We'll just keep playing this game. Drossel is a short-lived stint of a character whose life runs out as quickly as a wind-up toy will lose momentum. But in that short amount of time, he's created an identity of dolls, of girls made of porcelain and clay and silver and gold, with no will of their own. And among these girls, in the midst of this puppeteer, stands Elizabeth. She's sided, or at least been taken to the side, of the doll master, and so it's her blade that swings for Ciel and Sebastian, even as her heart breaks. It is also worth noting that Drossel's workshop is a display of dismembered pieces, lit dimly by candlelight, and that he himself is a stiffly moving ginger-haired man, ball-jointed and theatrical as he dances around on screen before the final curtain closes on him. Ash and Angela are angels, but there's something more. A rapier thrown over one shoulder, a black whip and a corset to match, a place by the side of the queen, mind-controlling, bodies moving as though dolls, puppets, zombies. All of these are staples of Black Butler's anime, and up until the day the Campania first set sail, they have been a permanent fixture of tropes the series loves to show. At the end of the season, we are greeted by a Ciel with two eyes dripping tears, crying out at the unfairness of the world, asking, desperately, why everyone else loves our Ciel more. It all comes down to blood. Ciel's blood in Claude's mouth, a blood so unique it's enough to drive one mad. Why of all things did Alois Trancy attend his costume ball dressed as a vampire? In one of the final scenes, as Alois and Ciel talk, they are suspended in this void, in this mindscape where it is only the two of them, only their memories, only the vague echoes of each other. And across the floor stretches the black and white tiles of a chessboard. I don't think I'm making my deranged point clear enough, so I've concocted this little corkboard to basically get all of my thoughts down on the table. So, alright, first of all, let's go with Ciel. See? Right here. That's him. And this is the twin theory, theory that basically went, there's two of them, and it's been foreshadowed since the beginning, which, granted it was, but for the longest time that theory was considered complete nonsense until it was proven in 2017, but for the longest time, it was just speculative, and it wasn't around in 2010 when the season came out, so, we have this foreshadowing of Ciel and his brother, real Ciel being this version of him. And as you can see, there's a pretty clear connection between Ciel's brother and Eloise Trancy. I mean, come on, look at this. His brother's hair goes like this. Ciel's hair goes like this, and you can see that with the two of them. One goes like this, and one goes like this, and then in Eloise is almost impossible to draw a haircut. It goes like this, and then, okay, I think it gets worse, because Eloise is real Ciel, or he isn't, but he's foreshadowing of real Ciel. I mean, come on. When real Ciel shows up, he's standing on a staircase. He's looking... It's the same image. It's the same image. The subtle head tilt. The way that his shoulders are angled. The fact that he's on a staircase. And then we go here to the chapter art, and we see he's sitting with his legs crossed and his hands clasped together, and it's the exact same pose that real Ciel is sitting in. Their hair goes the same direction. They're both sitting on this chair. The same leg is crossed. Their hands are folded. This is the same. And then you go down, and you remember what I said about the blood, and you realize, why is he dressed like a vampire? A vampire. He's got fake teeth. He's got teeth on his coat. This kid is a vampire. He needs to drink blood to survive. Blood, which is the core reason why Claude lost his mind. It was Ciel's special blood, his special serious blood. Okay, so what about Claude? What similarity does Claude have to this? Because you can't have Eloise without Claude, and you can't have real Ciel without the Undertaker. But what does the Undertaker have in common with Claude? What similarity do these two have? Well, for one thing, they both wear glasses when they're doing their job. They both wear glasses. But, you see, when they're not doing their job, they take the glasses off. So, obviously, these two are... Not to mention, Claude is the one who lied to Eloise, who made him believe that Ciel was his enemy, which is the same thing the Undertaker did to real Ciel. Okay, this makes sense. And, oh, no, it keeps going. Why was there a Wolfman in Season 1 when the most important arc in the season, in the series that showed them in the Emerald Witch Forest involves Wolfmen? Why? That's... okay, I can't bullshit this one. Pluto was obviously a stand-in for Snake because they're both white-haired fourth servants with an animal motif. But that doesn't explain the fact there's wolves. And then we look over and we see these two, Joker and Russell. Why do they have the same guy liner? They're both ginger. They're both involved with sick, terrible men who make dolls out of children? Why do they each have a little emblem on the corner of their eye? And then we look over and we wonder what is going on with Ash and Angela and Charles. Four characters whose whole motif is that they're basically the same person. 2 Charleses and 2 Angels. And why does this Charles have the exact same sword as Ash? And then we look over and we wonder, why does Beast, dear Beast, the one who, oh God, she's got a whip, and so does Angela. Is it the same one? Is it? Oh my God. I feel as though I'm losing it. And then I look back over all I've learned, all I've observed, and I see him. He laughs because he knows what he is. You're probably wondering, what the fuck do I mean by that? Well, Alois is not Ciel's brother. Alois is not Ciel. Alois is not meant to be either of those things. That being said, he is an echo, the distorted concept of a boy in a situation identical to Ciel, a version dragged from the Shadow Realm, a parallel version, a parallel world, another dimension. He's the most explicit confirmation of the twin theory, and he came out in 2010, good for him. He is a boy who is literally Ciel, who takes Ciel's identity, who shares a past of Ciel, whose memories are so blurred of Ciel's they can be intermixed easily. He is the boy who will do anything to protect his little brother. Just look at the screen, I can't make this up, no! Alois is not real Ciel. Alois is only real in the canon of this particular season. He is nothing more than an Easter egg, an incredibly clever echo of a plot that has been masterfully constructed since the creation of the series. Alois is the loudest and cruelest piece of foreshadowing I have ever seen. Because who does this? Who makes a plot twist as important as a character literally being revealed to have a twin brother, and then spoils their own plot twist in an anime original season, but doesn't spoil it enough for anyone to notice, at least not when it came out? Who veils their intentions and the themes of their plot so vaguely that when we see a character who, in a meta sense, is supposed to be a cheap copy of Ciel Phantom Hive, we find out he's actually deeply narratively reminiscent of the true copy of Ciel, his twin, who is also Ciel. And that's why Alois is laughing, because unlike the other Ciel who was doomed by the set in stone nature of the manga, this character has the ability to literally change the fate of the series, because no matter what he does, it doesn't matter. The season isn't going to be canon anyway. He can't exist in the same world as Ciel's twin brother, because Ciel's twin brother is him, because without Ciel's twin brother, there would not be an Alois. This narrative that has doomed and tortured him, it doesn't matter. Alois is not canon. And that means he is free to end his story however he wants to. This doomed narrative that applies to the Ciel twins doesn't apply to him. And so that means he can change it. He can save Ciel. And he is the only person in this god-forsaken franchise who can. Because he doesn't exist. I am not saying that this little anime boy has somehow obtained sentience and is also able to understand the meta of the peculiar narrative situation he's in. But forewarning now, I'm in the editing stage. I just recorded a bunch of footage and I just watched it over. And it gets really intense accidentally. I think I start crying at one point. So just brace yourself for that. I don't know what the fuck happened to me for the last 20 minutes of this, but yeah. He has a squeaker. This is one of the rare instances where Ciel escapes. When Ciel is saved from the grip of Sebastian. This doesn't happen frequently, if at all. Black Butler doesn't have good endings. Kuroshitsuji musicals also almost always end on the grim note, restating where they stand, how Ciel's fate is sealed. Even the live-action movie that we all pretend never existed ended on a similar note, that Ciel lived only to serve as a pawn for Sebastian. All that he was doing was simply playing into that, playing in the palm of the demon's hand. Multiple characters throughout the manga and anime, but mostly the Undertaker in all iterations, have stated how Ciel's been doomed from the beginning. Ciel doesn't get a happy ending, and as the manga unfolds, we find he doesn't want one. This is a child who has lost everything dear to him. This is a child with no better options and no hopes for the future. A liar who is so wrapped in his lies, urged on a path of darkness and destruction, with not even a spider's thread for him to pull himself out by. This is the cruel fate of Ciel. It is the downward spiral of every piece of Kuroshitsuji media, for him to never truly escape the demon. In official artwork that portrays them together, we're given this overwhelming visage of this tiny child looking even smaller and more helpless in comparison to this darkness. How that forms an almost meta-narrative in the way the fan service creates a almost power dynamic, an emphasis on a pre-existing power dynamic. We long for an ending where Ciel can smile joyfully, but we know that that isn't what's going to happen. He is going to die, trapped as an insect in a web, as a lamb straight to the slaughter. Even if they are nobles, they are truly pawns. If Season 2 has taught us anything, it's that Ciel truly doesn't have any autonomy. He doesn't have his memories, he doesn't have the context, he doesn't even have the one thing that he holds over Sebastian, and that is the truth. Ciel has none of it. And one of our first scenes of him is him shoved limply in a suitcase. It doesn't take an English professor to note the direct symbolism of that very image. And the symbolism is, he can't do anything. He's a suitcase. He's just being moved from place to place. And as soon as he returned to himself, he wanted the death the narrative had chosen for him. And that was the one choice that he could still hold to his pride. What saves him from it has to be truly powerful, to stand up to the darkness that surrounds him, to defy the horrific maw opening straight to hell. And what it is the little body dead on the altar. It's the little body rotting in the grass. The ring as bright as candy and stained red as the blood it came from, and the soul it belongs to. Those are the pieces that will save Ciel Phantomhive. Aloys is a testament to his brother's dying spirit falling 7 years into the past to protect him. And in the same way Aloys is him, Aloys is Ciel. Aloys is the Ciel we knew never existed. Aloys is his own person. Aloys is a mess. Aloys is a foil of the narrative. Aloys is a pawn to throw in the face of the screen. Aloys is a conglomeration of everything wrong and right with this goddamn series. And damn it, he deserves. I went on a really long rant about how he deserves the world, and I think the worst part is, it's a bit of a funny concept when you first think of it, the idea that this little guy has some meta super ability to kind of transcend the Black Butler medium, and how his existence is a defiance of the narrative, and your existence is against God. looking into the meta of it, like that's all very fun and silly and lighthearted. But then I don't think it's a joke anymore.
The blood on our hands is the wine. We offer a sacrifice. Come on and show them your love. Rip out the wings of a butterfly for your soul, my love. Rip out the wings of a butterfly for your soul.
This gets a little heavy, so I have a speed paint going, if you need to look at that, but yeah, I hope you saw the warnings before. Alois is trapped in the web of Claude, but also the web of the story. The narrative deprives him of power and control. Alois is a human boy in a world of monsters, and at the very same time, he is a character in a world of caricatures. Black Butler writes good characters. That is one of the biggest strengths of the manga. Yana Toboso, whatever you want to say about her, writes good and endearing characters. The anime often lacks that cohesion. But that's where things become a little muddled, because Alois Trancy, without a shadow of a doubt, would have made a lot more sense if he had been given a manga volume. The other characters are one note, they're simple villains, their motivations are clear-cut for TV. But he's so complex that it almost feels like he's jarringly out of place. And the reason it feels that way is because he is. Alois can be read a number of ways. He can be seen as bitter and jealous and unreasonable. He can be seen as a walking hypocrite, someone who would just as soon abandon Claude as soon as he got the very thing he wanted. He wanted Claude to smile at him, and yet, why did he run away? Unable to develop an inner sense of safety, the abused child remains more dependent than other children on external sources of comfort and solace. Unable to develop a secure sense of independence, the abused child continues to seek desperately and indiscriminately for someone to depend on. The result is the paradox observed repeatedly in abused children, that while they quickly become attached to strangers, they also cling tenaciously to the very parents who mistreat them. This book is called Trauma and Recovery. It's by Judith L. Herman. I'm not trying to compare actual abuse victims to fictional characters, especially not fictional characters in a media that mishandles things so overtly. That being said, I've met a lot of people who have felt a sort of connection to Alois as a character, and a kind of understanding as if they themselves had been seen. And I think there's really something to that, something that can never truly be taken away from them. We don't choose the characters that we connect to, but I'm glad he exists for them. In the first episode, Sebastian calls Alois dirty and says he wouldn't allow someone like him to touch Ciel. And as the lights go out on that episode, as Sebastian escapes and Claude starts after him, Alois throws his arms around Claude's leg and pleads for him to stay. It's just like he said, I'm nothing but a brat, foul and vulgar, he says, and not even Claude's words can reach him. Think about how in episode 7, he is shown compared to Ciel in the wake of their fight. Ciel has all the light in his eyes, and all Alois gets is snot and blood dripping down his mouth and nose. As Claude, still reeling from Ciel's serious blood, looks down on him, all Alois can say is, "You look like you're staring at maggots swarming a dead deer," and then he collapses. Even still, in one of their rare scenes together, as Alois corners Ciel, he comments upon how he wishes his soul were as blue as Ciel's. Ciel is pure, and the narrative deems Alois as not pure, even if there is no difference between them. And Alois knows that's how the narrative sees him. He doesn't even try to fight it. But he's upset by it. There is nothing sexual about Aloise's relationship with Claude. Somewhere down the line, Aloise was confused for a sexual character, a character whose entire lens was so sexualized that everything he did could not be seen as anything outside of it. When, if you view most of his actions as just the somewhat improper behavior of a boy who never had a decent conversation about boundaries, he becomes a lot less of a flirt and more of a very tragic example. A lot of horrible things happened to Aloise. Aloise survived, and yet he was terribly alone. There was only one person in the world who'd understand him, and that was Ciel. But he didn't get Ciel. He got Claude. He chases this idea of love into oblivion. Alois will do anything for it, and like I mentioned, he's a character who's deeply confused between romance and the desperate desire for someone to just care about him. Just goddammit, care about him. In fact, it's never specifically stated that he even understands romantic love, just that he wants some form of care. We keep getting these little flashes of Alois and the Earl Trancy sprinkled throughout the season, and almost all of them show him in some sort of powerful light, as if Alois is strong enough to make this rich old monster of a man bow to him. But it's a lie. In episode 1, in the first scene, and then once again in the final scene with the former Earl in episode 8, we see a flash of the trauma and the brutality of it, the rose-colored glasses dropping away, and the horror truly being allowed to sink in. Oh my god. Alois is not sexual, and yet this series, in official art and in the actual show, it's this thing that won't leave him alone, that flavors even the worst moments of his life as fan service, as something to gawk at. He is not sexual, his story is not sexual, and yet he is sexualized. What does a character do when his existence is in the echo of another boy who hasn't been introduced and won't be introduced for another 7 years, utterly rendering him a piece of meta foreshadowing with missing context and the horrific nightmare of being compared to the Ciel Phantom Hive? What does a character do when the narrative sets up the gallows? Because that's how it is. Alois will always be inferior to Ciel. Earlier I joked about how angry I was that he didn't get the entire season to himself, but when the series came out, that opinion would have been in the minority. The audience loves Sebastian and Ciel, and this kid, he's not going to be able to hold a candle to that. Alois is not going to be able to endear himself to a mass audience who has come in to see Ciel and Sebastian. They love Ciel and Sebastian. We love Ciel and Sebastian. Who is this? Oh, that's right. He's the villain. The copy is never appreciated, at least not as much as the original. And in every attempt at comparison, he only sinks deeper and deeper into his own personal narrative hell. What does a character do when his existence is so fundamentally doomed in every imaginable way that the love the fans have for Alois Trancy is mostly in spite of the story built around Alois Trancy? There is a reason, whenever I talk to Season 2 superfans, that there is a long moment of hesitation and a tangible reluctance you can cut with a knife whenever I ask, hey, you guys want to rewatch Season 2? It's almost a little beautiful. Black Butler Season 2, a season held together by thread, string, and duct tape. Those pieces being poor pacing decisions, a deeply disturbing plot, extremely inconsistent characters, a lack of tonal awareness, and a broken story that's fundamentally so goddamn confusing. Like, all of this comes together to create this web of shit. And right in the center of the web, so entangled in it that it's impossible to cut him free, is a character that makes just enough sense to look you dead in your eyes and scare you. And what does he do now that he has the audience's attention? Now that he has the smallest monochrome of power? Through Claude and through the story as a whole, his insecurities become the very things the audience and the narrative mock him for. He's impure, he's foul. Characters gawk about how attractive he is. They fawn over him, they lust over him. And his only reaction is fear and disgust. And in a similar way, he realizes that he has a place in the story, the place of the pawn, of the villain's pawn no less. Because that's how things go. Claude will kill him to get Ciel and Sebastian, and Claude will battle over Ciel, and Claude will eventually lose. It's all about Ciel. Ciel will die no matter what, and Alois will die too, no matter what, but it won't be anywhere near as glorious. So, he looks at that narrative, dead in the eyes, and he breaks it. The pawn, the piece, the wingless insect is what takes the story and breaks it. He saves Ciel from the fate of a doomed death. Ciel, who is submerged in darkness without any sort of way out. Remember how I said that? This is his way out. This is the spider's thread for him to pull himself free. At the cost of Alois's soul, Ciel wins the game he didn't know he was playing. At long last, he has the strength of an adult, of a god, of a goddamn demon. Sebastian cannot hurt him, or at least Sebastian won't get his soul. Sebastian has no more power over Ciel, and so the lambs have become the wolves and the insects have become free. Alois reaches his own little paradise too. As his soul ceases to exist in the world, Ciel asks him if he's satisfied with what he's done. And all he responds with is a simple, "I don't really know. I'm no longer sure how I feel, but strange as it sounds, that's fine with me." And he smiles as he disappears. He should smile. He won, even if he doesn't fully understand the battle. Ciel finally managed to protect his little brother, at least in one universe. And Alois managed to triumph over the demons, over the audience, and over the narrative at least one time. So that was so, intense, my hair fell out. No, but, if you're gonna record a video essay, do not schedule a haircut halfway through. My hair's still kind of in shock. It's sticking up in weird places, and it's not really how it's supposed to be. But in like about 3 days, it will go back to being curly. So, you're just getting me with this. I'm pretty sure a guy who called me a slur had this exact same haircut. But, you know what? Who wore it better? Anyway, the video essay should be done. But I want you to remember one kind of weird tangent I went on in, like, the first 20 minutes of it. Remember? For some reason, this is coming back. This is back. Think about it. We have 3 things at play here. We have the characters. We have the narrative the characters are in. And then we have the audience reacting to those narratives. So, we discussed how Alois saved Ciel in the narrative. But we didn't say how he saved him from the audience. How I said that Sebastiel was the ship in the Black Butler fandom in the early days. And how it basically went by unquestioned. You know, if you were into Black Butler, it was pretty expected that you would be the one shipping those two. It was the very, it was the early fandom days. It was a wasteland, anything went. So the show came out in 2008, so the Sebastiel fan base had kind of a very big amount of time to grow and to establish their identity and what they were. So Sebastiel was the most popular ship, but then this show comes around. And like I said, you know, the show has the weird Voltron convention where it has a double of Ciel and a double of Sebastian that you can guilt-free ship them with if you don't want, you know, to get into the weird semantics of shipping the demon with a child. But, Even if the show didn't treat that seriously, the fans did. And Sebastiel suddenly had some wild competition. And now, I'm not saying the people that, like, ship Sebastian and Ciel are bad people. I know there's a very big difference between the stuff that you like to read about and the stuff that, like, you actually think is acceptable. And as long as they're, you know, being responsible and not harming or confusing any children with it, they can do whatever they want in their own separate corner, preferably away from me. But I want to remove that sort of morality argument from it, just for a second. Like, whatever you think of the ship, I just want you to think about it from the perspective of how the characters would think about it. And so, you have this fandom world where Ciel is permanently chained to Sebastian. You know, he's stuck with this demon that could kill him as easily as we might crush a bug. And then suddenly, in 2010, there's this bright light. And Alois Trancy emerges. And he puts himself between the boy and the demon. And looks at Ciel and says, No, you don't have to do this. Come. Be with me. I will protect you. It was this shift just in the fan base. Like, it changed. It went from it being, oh, well, you have to ship Ciel and Sebastian, to, oh, well, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of variety. Most popular fics that were coming out at the time were Ciel-Louise. They weren't all Sebastiel. I mean, think of Devils Like to Dance. All of that stuff that my dear mutuals have written. All of that feeds into this time period, this reckoning, where Sebastiel's norm was interfered with this. So what did the fans do when they looked over and they saw Alois Trancy standing in the way of this extremely popular pairing? This character that literally just shook things up. Like, he changed things permanently in his season. He managed to give Ciel some autonomy, some power, and now here he was, stomping all over their favorite ship with his little pointed heels. Do you want to know what they did? Do you want to know what they did to him? I'll show you. Look up here. That's what they did. They fucking obliterated him. I know I'm just coming into this with no sources and just speaking from the heart, but when I say that this kid was not popular, I mean it. And if you've been in the fandom, you know it too. Ranked number 1 on the top 10 most hated Black Butler characters on CBR.com. People made fan fictions specifically about despising him. He was always reduced to this, like, flirty kid with... There's a reason that people generally cut off his character past him saying Olay that one time, and also, you know, wearing short shorts. Like, that is literally his personality for the first part of the fandom. And, like I said, they did not like him. And I don't know what this adds to the grander narrative that Alois is the misguided fragment of a story that hadn't been told yet, that he is a sort of world-defying guardian angel for Ciel, that his existence scoffs in the face of everything Black Butler is, and that he stands on his own 2 feet, not as a little anime person, but as a character, as someone who could have been real I don't know what the fact that all of this being presented to an audience of people in the early 2010s, before YouTube was even really a thing, he went through all of this, and then the audience went, no, you're getting in the way of Sebastiel. Stay back, get away from me. But, I think it's important, because if we think about it, even then, there were people who still cared about him, who still saw a strange infinity in him. And those people, well, they're still around. So I guess he still won. This is not an easy video to conclude. But for some final closing thoughts, I think I'll just say that the show truly is a ridiculous experience, one that you can't exactly take in on its own. Much like a pill that you can't swallow without eating something first, you can't have season 2 without at least knowing the manga, at least knowing season 1, at least knowing the fan base. Because season 2 on its own is terrible. It's a story about this sad, traumatized kid being tossed around by the plans of demons. It's also not particularly good television, but on its own, it is infinitely more depressing. And so, one of the best things that you can do is to look at it from a broader perspective. To embrace it, not as its own little piece, its own little bastard disowned child that's no longer allowed to sit at the table of the Black Butler content. No, it's a part of it. It's just as much a part of it as anything else. So take a seat, grimace, and laugh. Laugh with it. Because what else are you supposed to do?
All of your good is mine. 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 Like a knife in the woods, yeah, you hunt down the good in me.
It's July 3rd, I just got the anime announcement. What the fuck? Just remember, just remember. He was here first.